trying to just, get your feet wet. It was screw politics, Let's go kill some Russians.
Matt, RPG!
I enjoyed the hell out of it. I had a great time on Red Dawn.
Honestly, when people ask me what's the best time you ever had on a movie, I say Red Dawn every time.
Well, what made me want to do Red Dawn? I mean, I grew up as a child living Red Dawn, I was leaping out of spider holes, mowing down Ruskies at the age of 8.
I think the movie, touches somewhere a chord, people's desires to live free.
Avenge me! Avenge me!
The idea of living, that instinct is very strong, and I really think that's what ultimately makes the film work.
Wolverines!
When I grew up, I spent 2 years living in Colorado in the mountains. And all my friends in Colorado, we all thought we were mountain men. And we went hunting all the time. We had trap lines and stuff like this. And the whole thing of living up there, thinking about when, we would always talk about, when the Russians come, because there was always, we were promised that the Russians would come. And therefore, all of society would break down. And we would have to fight the Russians with our cap-lock rifles and live in the mountains. And so this was sort of a fantasy for many years.
I read the script, and this is just like a young actor's dream to be the leader of a teenage group of guerrilla fighters in a very controversial movie that got a lot of people a little scared.
My dear departed friend, God rest him, Christopher Penn, showed me the script, and Chris was so excited about it and thought it was just the greatest thing he'd ever seen, ever.
They had a screenplay by Kevin Reynolds called 10 Soldiers, I think. They called me up and they said, "You're the guy that we want to have do this, that I'm the guy you call up for an invasion of the United States, so."
And it just read so well. The original title was called 10 Soldiers, and it since moved on to Red Dawn.
I mean, the idea of it was really compelling. I think everyone had that kind of paranoia at that time.
I mean, I was the only person in Hollywood who would dare do this movie, Hollywood was very left-wing. There's parts of me that are very left-wing. I mean, get me going about corporate greed and I turn into a Maoist. But I have a lot of contradictions. I'm a militarist, and an extreme patriot at times, so I believe in all of that rugged individualism, hogwash,
He's such a throwback to, this is my set, and I'm in charge. And, he was still packing a pistol on the set then, and I like that a lot.
He's taken a lot of criticism. Of course, he deserves it. When he does an interview with a journalist, he just for an intimidation factor, he leaves a loaded .45 automatic sitting on his desk. So he is a bit of a wild man.
I remember it really vividly going to the audition for Red Dawn. John Milius was in this big office in MGM, and I went up there and he goes, "I got 3 questions for you. Can you ride a horse? Could you shoot an animal? And could you eat it afterwards?" And I said, "Yeah, I've done all 3. He goes, "Well, what animal?" I said, "Well, I shot a squirrel." He goes, "Did you eat it?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "You got the job."
He would give me suggestions. He almost didn't give acting notes to the other actors. He did it through me. Of course, a lot of times it didn't make me very popular with the actors. But I was, I was Jed. I was serious as a heart attack.
My family would want me to stay alive. Your family would want you to stay alive. I mean, you think you're so smart, man, but you're just a bunch of scared kids.
Patrick Swayze was the most seasoned of all of us. He was certainly the oldest, and and he was supposed to be the leader and everything. So we all looked up to him because not only was he the oldest, he was the most experienced.
Take care of him. Don't worry.
He was so great, and I felt that enthusiasm would come out and that you would see him more than anybody else be eroded, that he would be, torn apart and that the war would just, grind him down.
He was great because he had worked enough and was experienced enough that he kind of took the youngsters by the hand and helped us along, not just performance-wise, but with horses and with guns and with just trying to keep your head about you in a very confusing landscape at times.
Milius is a very intense director. He's a very wonderful director. I love the man. But we had to call him the general. And he called me and he said, Swayze, you're my lieutenant of the art. So he says, I'm directing these little suckers through you. So he put a lot of responsibility on my shoulders, and I took it really seriously.
But I do remember that him and Jennifer Grey did not get along very well. And then it was funny later when they did Dirty Dancing together, I was like, oh. I don't remember why. I just remember they fought, like, brothers and sisters.
Of course, me, I was a little overly intense. I think Jennifer Grey probably never wanted to work with me again after that. Of course, we did.
It was very supportive, and he knew right away that I was relying on him for his help and guidance. And what he was dealing with, though, during that movie, the death of his father in real life, and that had just happened, I don't know, a month prior to us starting. So when he's looking at that photo, that scene is an homage to the memory of his dad, who he loved and treasured and worshipped dearly. So what he was going through was pretty heroic,
I love you, Maddie. I know.
And I don't think Charlie had ever been in a movie before. I think this was his very first thing. He was so enthusiastic because he'd been on the set of Apocalypse Now, and so he says, I just got to do this war movie.
For Charlie to be in his first movie and have it be a war movie with John Milius must have been really hard for him. But he was wonderful and very intense. And it's fun to see him in a comedy now.
The scene where we're throwing the football out there? Charlie, bless his heart, he'll be mad at me for saying it. He came up to me and he says, so, Powers, how do you think I'm doing? Am I doing okay, and all this kind of stuff? I was like, Charlie, yeah, you're doing good. No, seriously, I'm really worried. I don't, I'm like, come on, man. And look at him now.
Go for it, buddy. All right.
See Thomas Howell, Tommy? He was wonderful because he really was this. I mean, he was really a cowboy. So we all, really looked to him for the riding and he had that, swagger. You know what's crazy? I have these cowboy boots on, and Tommy Howell helped me get these cowboy boots on Red Dawn. I swear to God. I just realized that. Look at, they're all beat up. But I remember he got us cowboy boots, and he, taught us how to ride, and he's just a really kind, great soul. And I personally, as an actor, looked to him because he really was this kind of Western kid.
The way that it read, I just liked the idea of playing the kid that kind of goes off the deep end.
All that hate's gonna burn you up, kid.
Keeps me warm.
He becomes like somebody who gets into a river, and the river just carries him away. And it's not that he gets ground up so much, but he's really drowned in the river because he becomes absorbed with the war, and he loves it. And he has to kind of end the way he does, just standing there shooting at a Hind helicopter,
I got a couple of heirlooms I want to hide with you. My granddaughter's.
Did I know Jennifer before we got this movie? I do remember that I went to New York and she helped me get my hair permed. This was really far out for her. She was like a New York kid. I remember her being just shaking her head. I mean, I was from Minnesota and, I could kind of get it. But I remember her just, both of us, especially with the guns and the politics, it was really far away from us. So we kind of held on to each other through the whole experience.
She and Jennifer just got into it and took it seriously, They were both real game, They weren't going to not keep up with the boys.
Well, both girls had a wonderful quality to them because they're so fresh, and they had sort of this great kind of teenage quality, that you don't know what's happened to them. You just know something's bad. They've probably been raped by the Russians or something, and everything, and they're happy to find their own.
My character was supposed to have been, you know, like brutally raped or something. That's what it was alluded to. So I really wasn't supposed to speak, and that was supposed to be my character. So yeah, I just get to be moody about it.
So what's up your ass?
Shut up! Don't you ever say that again! Hear me? You say that again, I'll kill you.
There was a beautiful scene between Powers Booth and I where I said, I'm going to die before ever having made love. Will you please make love with me? And so we just kind of, you know, he said, okay. And we kind of disappeared out of frame. And they took the scene out of the movie, which was sad because it kind of explained my character. It was a nice scene.
Who are you?
Andrew Tanner, Lieutenant Colonel, U.S. Air Force.
Well, the character had to be someone that the kids could look up to. You know, they're out here playing soldiers the best they know how to do. I mean, you think about it, what did they know about anything military at all? They didn't know anything except, you know, hunting.
And us being such wild childs, we definitely needed that mature figure, and Powers served that function really well. He was an inspiration because he's a fabulous actor. Also, he became like a big brother to me, like Sam Elliott did in Roadhouse.
This character had symbolically to be somebody who could teach them something about tactics and mix in military tactics with guerrilla warfare and hopefully some form of survival.
You lay down grazing fire and this defilade. I think that's pretty simple. Anybody got any questions so far?
What's a flank?
A defilade?
I also think that this character came to symbolize some kind of sanity for them, a father figure kind of, and or some rationale as to what they were about.
They brought their kids, said they didn't have food enough to feed them through the winter. They want to give them to you, Jed.
You know, you want to have actors, you know, like a Ben Johnson. How can you not have a good time with Ben Johnson hanging around, you know? Or I had Harry Dean Stanton. What's better than Harry Dean Stanton?
It made you hate me sometime, but you understand now, don't you?
You know, one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when Darren Dalton, who was the bug eater, the traitor, still call him the bug eater today, when he is pressed by Patrick Swayze to be exiled from the group and shot. That scene on Johnson's Mesa was about 20, 25 below zero on the day we did it. And I loved that Milius just came up to me and said, look, no emotion here. Patrick's the guy that's kind of breaking down and having a hard time doing it. You just got to get the job done, ride up, drop the guy, swing up on your horse and ride out of town. And that's what I did, and I love the scene, you know, it came out really disconnected and scary and eerie, you know, the wind was howling and the guy was laying there. And I remember speaking with Darren Dalton, when he took the bullet hit, we all jumped on our horses and rode out of town, and the camera was basically behind him, over his shoulder, watching us ride out of town, or away from him. And he said that there was a moment where he really felt like, holy crap, you know, what if this wasn't a movie and I'm dying on this mesa watching these people right away? He said it was so surreal, you know, and a lot of times that movie was that way. I mean, we were always aware that we were making a film, but there were moments when you couldn't help feel the isolation, being exiled from the town and surviving.
There was one line I had when I single-handedly attacked the tank. The line was something effective, you know, a good, finally you get a good shot or something like that, your army pukes. I remember talking to John, I was like, John, I can't say this line, come on, man. No, you gotta say this line. Okay. So I give it my best shot, thinking, you know, this is horrible, I'm gonna be laughed off the screen. And I remember seeing it, and the audience roared and applauded.
Shoot straight for once. You army pukes.
There's one scene that I thought I nailed. Up to that point, you know, I'd only done 10 scenes professionally, but that was my best one. And I come back to the camp after witnessing the assassination of some of the parents, you know, and I got to tell everybody whose parents are dead. And it was this great, you know, emotional scene. And then I go to the movie and I'm waiting for my big moment. And it goes from me dropping the binoculars to Swayze giving the line at the end of the scene, or somebody, right? And I said to my dad, I said, geez, man, I thought I was great in that, and then it's gone. And he said, well, traditionally, you don't need to tell the audience about something they've already seen. And he's right.
The Russians need to take us in one piece, and that's why they're here now. That's why they won't use nukes anymore, and we won't either, not on our own soil.
You know, sitting around the campfire, I think I gained their respect that day. Because they had been the Wolverines, you know, they were everything. And then here's this person coming in, and that actually kind of worked for the movie, because that's how it happened. You know, I came in when I came in. So it was sort of like part of them, but not part of them. But that day, this character earned the Wolverines' respect. So that was special to me.
Well, who is on our side?
600 million screaming Chinamen.
Well, last I heard there were 1 billion screaming Chinamen.
There were.
Milius surrounded us with great performers. I mean, Bill Smith.
Yeah, he was great because he's a Russian linguist. He used to work for the CIA as a linguist and stuff, and so he loved doing the scene in Russian.
Мы бьемся за залдами. Это маленькие, очень дикие звери.
He was terrifying. He was terrifying. And I don't know if he was in character the whole time, but you couldn't talk to him on the set. You couldn't, you just kept your distance. But it worked in the movie. Look how brilliant he is in the film. I mean, he's really an imposing force, you know?
¿Está bien? Sí, sí, sí. Mira, a ver.
Ron had sort of the credits. I mean, when you're the Superfly, you can't get cooler than that.
Теперь я как вы. Милиционер.
He was very good as the Cuban. And I like the idea that both those characters have a certain sympathy. They're not just kind of robots, you know, they're just robotic villains or something, standard villains. They both have sympathy for the insurgents, you know, because they were once insurgents themselves, you know. Doesn't mean that they won't hunt them down and kill them. Ron O'Neal, of course, he's going to let him go because he's Latin. He's not Slavic. He's not as hard and cruel as Bill Smith. That night was so cold. That night was 40 below zero. When you see them on the swings, you see this sort of glittering stuff coming down. It's not like snow or it's not like ice or something. It's sort of this just very glittering, almost magical. They call that the White Death. You don't want to be out when the White Death is coming. And I remember it went from 17 above to 40 below in about 25 minutes. And I thought, my God, if it keeps this way, the ground will crack.
It was so freezing that we learned the best technique for keeping your feet warm was you take your bare feet, you put a plastic bag over the bare foot, and then you put the wool sock, and then the silk sock. And that's how we stayed warm.
We had to buy Everest assault suits for almost everybody on the crew. And even with that, everybody got a little bit of frostbite around the goggles and stuff.
I remember one moment in particular when Darren Dalton and Tommy Howell and I, we were so cold approaching a scene that Tommy was actually crying. He had nothing left. He was frozen into tears. Now he'll give the interview and say I was crying, but that's not true. My tear ducts had frozen.
Having to go through an ordeal to pull off the movie sort of banded everybody together, you know? I mean, I've actually got frostbite so bad in my hands and toes that now if my fingers get the slightest bit cold, it feels like somebody's shoving toothpicks under my fingernails.
You know it's cold when you're forced to, you know, spoon Charlie Sheen. That's what we were forced to do, you know, huddle together and pretend we liked each other thoroughly. It was gross. Yeah.
You know, it's a pretty, particularly at that time, pretty outrageous concept.
Red Dawn scared a lot of people. We take our freedom for granted, and we think, oh, it can't happen to us. Red Dawn kind of just stirred the worldwide pot a little bit. and got people thinking and got people scared.
The movie is very operatic, you know. Avenge me! You know, that whole thing. It's very, you know, big. The emotions are big.
One of the points in the movie that's very interesting is that they do successfully run away from this. They get away, they survive, they're up in the mountains, and they really never have to come back because they can live up there. It seems like they can live there, but they have to come back because they have to deal with what's out there.
Were we to be invaded, you would be forced to take up arms, unless they're dropping nukes. Then it doesn't matter, you know, which is probably what would happen. But in a conventional sense, I think it does lend itself to the fantasy idea of defending your actual city block, you know?
I knew it was kind of an outrageous film. I knew one thing that would happen. I knew that Hollywood would condemn me for it. You know, that I would be regarded as a right-wing warmonger from then on, you know, totally uncontrollable, unhousebroken.
It's pleasing to me to have been involved in something that clearly has weathered time and has its own cult following and all those kind of things.
Someone's got to live. Somebody's got to make it.
The fond memories are more around the production than the actual work itself. It was the relationships that developed as a result of it. The memories of that film are special because of the people.
And I know I still draw on the training from Red Dawn, you know? I mean, no matter what happens, I'm not in a freaking spider hole 30 below zero up on Johnson's Mesa. It's not that bad. And a lot of times I pull from some of those experiences, and I know the rest of the guys do as well.
I am amazed at how much this movie has lived on and how much people remember it and how kids keep discovering it. I think because it's empowering to kids. And the truth is kids always do fight wars, you know, which is sad and true.
The fear factor has had to be real. These young people driven to accomplish and do things that they, you know, never would have imagined. It was a fantasy. I enjoyed every second of it.
Let's go.
I think the movie, you know, touches people's desires to live free. I think everybody wants to run around in the wilderness and protect their beliefs and their country. I think there's some, you know, streak of that. I mean, whether it's patriotism or whether it's just being hard to deal with.